Just a warning, this episode may contain language or topics that may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
It's cool how they built the tracks in the Meadowlands because it's basically just a pile of gravel that was just dumped and dumped and dumped. They made a huge roadway into the Meadowlands with gravel. And this is back in the 1800s, so you can imagine the type of machinery they used to do it. And they just kept dumping load after load after load after load after load. And then when they finally got enough fill in here, they were able to smooth it out and lay down the tracks. And that engineering has endured to this day. I'm walking along the same tracks that were here in 1870, that were laid down in 1870. It's pretty cool.
From the banks of one of the most polluted rivers in America to the ruins of New Jersey's not so long ago industrial past, Wheeler Antabanez has seen a lot over the years from his explorations of the decaying built environments of northern New Jersey. He navigates through a modern-day, almost dystopian landscape, all while being surrounded by the hustle and bustle of suburban neighborhoods, highways, and city streets that echo in the distance.
Just to get out here, only to be cut off and not actually be able to reach them because there's water in between of unknown depth. Not much water, just a little. They're kind of like little islands out there. I assume they're for the antenna because there's this old antenna in the water, and you can tell it's really, really old. It's just sitting there in the water, been there for a long time. Someone has set up this yard with all sorts of shopping carts and bicycles and twine, just all sorts of a weird collection of carts, strollers, all this junk. So obviously people are over here. You know, you see evidence of humans out here in the marsh all the time, but I don't run into humans very frequently, you know, which is fine. I'm not really looking to. I'm Wheeler Antabanez. I live in New Jersey, and I like to go to all the abandoned spots and write about it, a lot of times for Weird New Jersey, and also I write books as well.
How did you get into exploring abandoned places? Like, what caught your interest in it?
Well, when I was little, growing up in Caldwell, New Jersey, actually West Caldwell, I learned how to ride a bike. I taught myself in my driveway how to ride a bike pretty early. I think I might have been like 7 or 8. I don't know. I was like young. And me and my friends, we all just started riding our bikes all over the place. And, you know, back then I was born in 1977. So I grew up in the 80s, and it was just kind of like this little suburban utopia going on back then where you could just go anywhere you wanted and you didn't have to fear anything. And my parents, as long as I was home for dinner, they never really asked me like what I was doing or where I was going. And as it turned out, near my house, there was this giant tuberculosis hospital up on the hill, and no one knew about it. I had never even heard of it. And one day we were up at this place called Fox Hollow, which actually became the housing for a lot of the Sopranos, like when they went to film The Sopranos. But back in the 1980s, they were just building these McMansions. They were just getting started with this. And so we used to go and play in all these McMansions as they were being built, when they were just 2x4s and piles of construction material and stuff. And it was like a paradise for us as little kids. And then we started exploring the woods behind these houses. And when we got up to the top of this hill behind the woods, we came out one day and there was this massive abandoned hospital there. That was the scariest thing we had ever seen. And you guys got to picture this. It was like up on a hill. There was no cars. There was no houses. There was no anything. It was just woods, which is pretty rare in Essex County. And this massive, dilapidated, overgrown, spray painted hospital, all white bricks, massive, huge. And so we approached it a little bit and we got through the bushes and we saw on the columns of where you'd enter into this hospital, there was swastikas and it said, "Welcome Aryan Warriors," right across the front of these doors. And we were just we were so scared when we saw this that we ran into the woods and ran back to our bikes and all the way home. But then we knew that there was a giant hospital up on this hill. So we started going back and we started daring each other to go a little further every time. And eventually we got to know the place like the back of our hands. It was like our playground, specifically my playground, because I live pretty close there and I would go up there all the time. So like I would end up taking friends on tours up there so they could come and, see it, because we started hearing about it in school. Like, oh, did you hear about this place up on the hill? You hear about this place? So anyway, it was completely closed off. No cars were allowed up there. And so it was basically like an island of abandonment in the middle of a sea of suburbia. And it was scary. It was a very like haunted place, very scary place, but it was also, it offered us complete freedom. My friends and I, we go up there and like smoke pot and drink when we were little, so it was incredible. It was like, it was a place to go to get away from the rules. And it was just total anarchy. Also, and just in my experience, no one ever got hurt. No one ever got in trouble. It was like a safe place, it was really safe. And, I just fell in love with it. And then so they tore that down. I went there when I was like a teenager with a group of my friends, and we went up there. We were going to show a couple of people who had never been there before. And the entire thing was leveled, except for just a few buildings on the outskirts. And it was like this rubble. And oh my God, it was like one of the saddest nights in my life, man. Up to that point, I was still pretty young. A lot of sadder nights since, but oh my God, yeah, it was just an amazing place. And then so what I found out was that, yes, there was this massive building that they knocked down up on top of the hill, but there was also just down the hill in Cedar Grove, a mental hospital called Overbrook that was on like 300 acres. Instead of white bricks, it was red bricks. But basically I transferred all my wanderings and my hanging out up on top of the hill down into this abandoned asylum that wasn't even abandoned yet. So I was breaking into those buildings when there were still patients like wandering the halls and stuff, just because I was so into it. Like, I was so into the building up on top of the hill. I loved it so much that I just naturally gravitated down towards these buildings. And about half of the complex on one side of Fairview Road in Cedar Grove, a lot of those buildings, like the nurses station and stuff, they were completely abandoned, but the buildings across the road still had mental patients wandering the halls. But everything was connected by tunnels. So even if you got into one of the abandoned buildings, you could easily go into one of the buildings that were still being used. And, so we used to infiltrate big time. And I'm talking, this is like when I was like, 14, 15 years old. Back then, we didn't fear like getting in trouble or anything like that. There's nothing they could do to a kid. So we just were having impunity with this stuff. Wow. Now I'm 45 years old. It's a little different. I'm not walking through people's yards and stuff anymore like I used to. But back then it was like paradise.
And this was the Essex Mountain Sanatorium?
Correct. Jeez. That's the official name of it. Yeah.
The fact that there were still patients there just kind of freaks me out. I mean, that's cool, but
that one was empty, the TB hospital. And in fact, like all these like medicines and stuff up there, like we found a bottle of morphine up there. What? And all this stuff. But yeah, down below where the patients were, that was really freaky because like you'd see them and they're like, wandering around and just sort of shuffling around on their Thorazine. And there was like this little caged area where they would all go smoke, like it was like a fenced in area. And I explored all that once it really got abandoned. And it turns out that little Cajun area where everyone used to smoke was right next to the morgue. So they had to walk right past the morgue just to go smoke a cigarette every day. And it's pretty sick, Wow. So you find out like all these weird things that you just never knew, infiltrating these places. And all the patient records were kept in place. So I used to sit there sometimes and just get a big pile of them and just sit in like a desk and just like read them, like
it's weird. You'd think like they'd destroy or take, put them in somewhere like for safekeeping or something.
Yeah, everything was there. All the equipment, everything. All the medical. And so you see, like they used to like hose down the patients and stuff in these tub rooms with cold water.
Things like that.
Basically, like we know is torture now, but they used to call it hydrotherapy back then. And so when you're walking through these corridors and you're seeing this abandonment, it's like really trashed. Everything's smashed. All the windows are broken. Everything's spray painted, garbage and medical supplies and just dirt all over the floor. But then you're seeing this and you're like, oh my God, you're hearing almost the screams like echoing through history. Like, wow, people really suffered here.
Yeah, it's terrible. That's crazy.
So you can trip out on that stuff when you go places like that. And, I just love that. So
For some, urban exploration is a pastime where they explore man-made structures. These locations are often not open to the general public. Wheeler tends to think of himself differently, though. He doesn't see himself as an urban explorer.
So, what is an urban explorer, Wheeler?
an urban explorer is a person who goes around with a life list trying to get to all these different places. Like these urban explorers, they end up basically like they have a website and they'll have all these locations and they go to all these different places and stuff. I never really did that. I like to go to the same places over and over and over and over and over and basically just hang out there, and turn it into like my clubhouse or whatever.
Yeah, it's like your place. Yeah.
So that's what I like. Not so much. They treat it like, almost like bird watchers where they have like a life list, I've been here, I've been there, I've been there,
Right.
People ask me because I do a lot of stuff with Weird New Jersey. They're like, oh, you know about Clinton Road? I'm like, oh, actually, I've never even been to Clinton Road, and I don't care to. I mean, I'm sure it's fine, but it's just, that's not me. That's why I kind of don't really consider myself that, like I say, I just like to go hang out. I like to get out of my house and go find a place where there's no people and I'm not going to see anybody. So trespassing was like a natural sort of thing for me. I like to smoke weed. So I'd always, when I was a kid, looking for places to go smoke weed. And that led me to these abandoned spots. I also back when I was little, I did a lot of spray painting and stuff like that. So, but even then I didn't go out on like long, big missions to try to go all city or anything, I would just concentrate on my spots. That was what was always important to me. Then when I started following the Passaic River, it sort of expanded my spot. You know what I mean? Instead of just being Overbrook and the sanatorium, it was like 95-mile river that I followed and all the abandoned buildings along the way, like in Patterson and Newark. It was just like bliss. It was amazing. And now actually, because I've been following the Passaic River for quite a while, a lot of the places that I used to go to, like in Newark especially, they've torn down many of these abandoned buildings. So I feel pretty lucky to have gotten into them when I did. And they're not the type of abandoned buildings that people have on their urban exploration lists. They're sort of anonymous. Just people don't go there, I guess, because it's dangerous or because maybe I think people tend to just follow each other around. Well, everyone will go to this one mental hospital, and then you'll see hundreds of other people flock to that one mental hospital. And then even though Overbrook was a pretty popular place and a lot of people went there, I always felt like it was kind of like my territory, even though it was a public institution.
I mean, it's interesting because people flocking to the same places to me just sounds kind of not as interesting and not, it's kind of boring. I would rather go to places that I feel like I've found on my own, right? Because then I feel like some level of ownership to it. It's mine. It's my space that I've kind of discovered and I'm exploring, rather than people just kind of flocking to the same place just because somebody else went there. I feel like that's just, you're not you're exploring, but you're not really finding something new.
Yeah. And anyway, exploring is kind of a misnomer for this because what are we exploring? Really things that are man-made. So obviously they're known to man, you know what I mean? We're not like Magellan here, or like Columbus or something.
Well, no, it's they're created, but now they're not what they used to be. It's something different, right? They're no longer used in the same way, or they're no longer used at all. So it's a very different perspective on that space.
It's almost like research, actually. It's we're researching, we're going back and taking a look at something that we already knew about a long time ago. Yeah. And now we're going back and researching it. And as far as finding places and having them be the ownership of it, that's how I felt with the tuberculosis hospital, the Essex Mountain Sanatorium, because like I said, I was 10 years old. My friends and I found it on our bikes. We didn't know about it at all. We'd never even heard of it before. So to us, it was we didn't know what it was called. We didn't know the name of it. We didn't know what it was used for. We knew nothing. All we knew, it was the scariest thing we'd ever seen. We wanted to go back as soon as possible. You know what I mean? And so, that was sort of pure exploration back then. And I do like to keep it that way too. Now, when I'm on the river, I'll have looked at it on Google Maps and I'll maybe know that there's an abandoned building I want to check out. But I still feel like I'm kind of breaking new ground sometimes. And then, of course, with the train tracks that I've been doing, that's pretty cool. I've been finding a lot of interesting stuff along the way. I don't know if you guys saw the abandoned or the old cat that I recently uncovered in Belleville.
No, I didn't see that.
Yeah, there's a documentary on it, actually, that Weird New Jersey put out. But we found this. I found this old parade float on the Newark branch, and we ended up. It was a Macy's Day parade float, and we ended up getting it a new home. And it's a whole story, but it was pretty cool. You know, a lot of interesting finds out there, a lot of adventures.
It's interesting because you've kind of like made a career out of it. And what kind of led you to the Passaic River? Is it just because of you know, being in the area, growing up in the area?
I think definitely growing up in the area. Yeah. This river has always been there. It's always been there. But then actually what happened was I lived in Whippany, New Jersey, and I was going for all these walks along the Whippany River. And I was thinking like, oh man, it'd be really cool to, get a canoe and go on the river and stuff. And so I actually did. I went on Craigslist and I got this canoe, and it was like this whole big thing. But then the Whippany River was like a little bit shallow. So I went onto Google Maps and I followed the Whippany River down, and I saw that it meets up with the Rockaway River in Troy Meadows. And then I see that the Rockaway River goes a little bit further and it ends up in the Passaic River. And I was like, ooh, the Passaic River. Yeah. And so actually I knew from my past, the first time I'd ever gone canoeing was at the Environmental Center in Roseland, New Jersey on the Passaic River. I was like a very, very little kid in summer camp there. And it all sort of came back to me, and I was like, oh, I can go to the Passaic River with this. And then once I started on the Passaic, forget it. I was just addicted. I was going back. I had the canoe. I was going back literally every day. I was, exploring. And that was like exploring. It was like, whoa, because I didn't know any of the geography. There is Google Maps. You can see it from the sky, but there's no street view, obviously, on the river. So, you're going there and you're finding things on the banks, like these old pumping stations. I mean, it was endless, just amazing. And a lot of diversity too. So like you'd have Newark, which is a big city. You'd have Patterson, which is a different type of big city. And then you'd have like the marshes of Troy Meadows that were just swamp. A lot of suburbia, a lot of cities, and everything in between. So it was like this incredible journey through North Jersey. And man, it's been awesome. It's been really awesome. And it never gets old. Like I've been following this now for like 20 years or so. And it's just like, oh my God, I just can't get enough even still. My big project is I had a speedboat in the water down in Kearney at Rapp's Boatyard in 2012 and 2013. And I patrolled the river with like a nice motor on my boat for 2 years. And that's like my big project that I'm working on. It's a book called Wheeler on the Passaic. And it's about those 2 years patrolling the lower river. So hopefully, it takes a long time. It's like 500 pages long. So I'm editing. Oh, wow. Yeah, it got a little bit out of hand, but I'm looking forward to that one.
Basically, how do you write these? Like, do you write these as if you're just like patrolling and just like whatever you see, or like you adding like historical elements? Book,
when I was patrolling the river for 2 years, what I did was I kept a notebook every single time, every day, basically a journal. And I adapted those. It turned out to be like 6 notebooks filled with observation. Wow. Yeah, I don't know how many words that was, but it was a lot. And so typed it all in. I've been editing it, and I've been basically transforming those notebooks, those diaries, those ship's logs, I guess you could call them, into a novel. A nonfiction novel all about, the stuff we found. And there was a lot that we found, a lot of interesting stuff. There was also a couple cleanups going on in the river during that time. So we had a lot of interactions with the people that were dredging and, the EPA people and stuff like that. There was a body that washed up that my wife and I saw get pulled out of the river. Yeah. Oh, and actually, I wrote about that in my book, 13 from the Swamp, which is available now. Account of finding a dead body on the river and stuff.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. That's saw the interview, I think it was like 12 years ago or something on YouTube about the body. What was it, a child?
Oh, that was a different body, but yeah.
Oh, okay, so you found multiple bodies.
Wait, the child was the one.
The child's body, thankfully.
Yeah, that was the one that was like moved, right? It was taken from like cemetery or something, right? And it was yeah.
Yeah, what it was taken from a cemetery in Connecticut, and they found 2 fishermen found it in Clifton floating down the river in like a styrofoam casket, like a little baby casket, which looks like almost like a cooler, small. And what it's theorized that because this baby, it was born with a problem. I forget exactly what the problem was. And it wasn't expected to live, but it ended up living for like 2 years. And it became sort of, everyone knew about it. They're like, oh, it's a miracle baby. It lived for 2 years when it was only supposed to live for like a week. And then finally the baby died, unfortunately. And these people parents buried it, and then it got dug up from a grave in Connecticut, theoretically because people who practice this religion, Palo Mayombe, which is like a magic type of like zombie magic, they get power from, like, the baby had power in their eyes because it lived for longer than it was supposed to. And they theorized that that's why the baby was taken, for ritual purposes. And actually along the river, there's this the cemetery where there's always bodies being stolen in Newark. Yeah. So
I didn't know people still did that shit.
Oh, yeah. And in fact, I found like Santeria stuff all over the river, like dead birds in ritual killed birds. I found this one ritual that's also in my book, 13 from the Swamp, all about, it was like cap guns and mouse traps and like all this weird stuff. But you could tell it was in like these cooking turkey tins or whatever.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And rum, like all this rancid like rum in glasses. You could just tell, you look at it, you're like, oh my God, this is some sort of magical spell here.
I mean, that's really intense. Yeah.
I had to keep them in souvenirs, but I didn't mess up the spell. Or maybe it's a good thing if I did. I don't know.
I don't know. It's either really good or really bad.
Wow. Exactly. So you never know what you're going to find along the river. Yeah. That's why I love it. And that's why I love the train tracks too. Same thing. You never know what you're going to find. And the train tracks in the river are very connected because they pass over, the tracks go over the river. So I don't know if you guys heard about this trail they want to make from Montclair to Jersey City. Those are the train tracks that I walk.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And so my next book is called Walking the Old Booten Line, a photographic journey on the abandoned rails of New Jersey. And it basically is my walk from Montclair to Jersey City. I walked the whole thing in 9 trips. Then I went and I flew my drone over it in like 7 trips. So I got all this like really cool aerial footage. And then I got to take a helicopter ride to see the final bit of it at Jersey City. So I flew over in a helicopter and took pictures, like looking back on the journey I just taken. It was pretty cool. So that's going to be coming out in October of this year.
Awesome. The title again? Okay.
Walking the Old Booten Line. And it's basically a sister book to the last book I had, which was Walking the Newark Branch. And the Newark Branch and the Old Booten Line, they connect in Kearney Marsh out by the Hackensack River. So to me, like all this geography is connected. You know what I mean? Even where I used to hang out, like at the sanatorium in Overbrook, all that water on the mountain, it flows down into the Peckman River. Like after it rains, it all flows down into the Peckman River, and then the Peckman River flows into the Passaic River. So it's like it's just all basically the whole watershed here is like I consider like my territory. I never really leave that territory, except the one time when I flew over Manhattan.
Well, I mean, you said the Passaic River is like 94 miles, so that's a lot of ground to cover.
And it drains even more too.
It's crazy to what?
It drains even more ground because, that's just the main drain that takes all the water from all the tributaries in about like 200 square miles or something, all the way up into New York State. That's all Passaic River water. It ends up. This is just what I've learned along the way, Yeah. It only probably matters to me, but I know I just I love this stuff. So,
I was going to say, you really have to have a passion for it to want to, continue doing it so much and also to write about it. I mean, people explore, but not everybody writes about it. What, I guess, motivated you to write about it? Write about your experiences?
I actually appreciate that question because no one ever asked me about my writing. They always ask me places I explore and all this. But no one ever asked about the writing. And to me, that's the most important part because I don't really consider myself what they call an urban explorer. Right. I consider myself a writer. And as a writer, the things I love to write about are the things that I love, which is going to these abandoned spots, going to the river. To me, as a writer, as a reader, it was only natural for me to go write about the things I love. And my first book was like this really angry, ranting book that I got arrested for and all this shit. And that's just not what I'm about. As an adult, that was my teen angst that I kind of had to work through. And after that book, I really had to sort of reevaluate and be like, this is not what I want to write about. This is not what I love. My anger, my hatred, all this stuff that I was indulging in back then, violent fantasies and things like that. That's not the type of writing I want to do. What is it that I love? And naturally, I just gravitated towards writing for Weird New Jersey about the place I loved the most, which was the sanatorium, the Essex Mountain Sanatorium. So really, I would say that this type of exploration and just having fun in abandoned buildings and stuff, it turned out to be a really good thing. It wasn't bad at all. Like, my parents used to be worried about that, but it was good. It gave me a good subject matter to write about, something that I could share with people rather than alienates me from people.
What got you started writing with Weird New Jersey? Like, how did you hook up with those guys and start writing for them?
Let's think. That was so long ago. I think it was centered around the sanatorium. I think I wrote them. Oh, you know what it was? I wrote them a piece of mail that they couldn't publish. It was like this crazy piece of mail. And in fact, they had this event in Maxwell's in Hoboken a bunch of years ago, maybe like 10 years ago, where they had all the mail that they couldn't publish, and different readers read it aloud in front of a crowd. And one of the pieces was the mail that I sent them that they couldn't publish. And I actually got to go up on stage and read it out loud. So I wrote this crazy email to them, and they kind of remembered it. And they, in fact, when I went there the first time in their office, they had it framed on their wall. And I was like, oh, okay, you guys remember me, So it all started with that letter, and it was about the sanatorium, and it was pretty nuts. Then, what happened was I kept in touch with them, and I sent Mark Moran an email, and I was like, hey, I've been out in my canoe. I've been doing the Passaic River and all this stuff. And they're like, well, why don't you do a special issue about it? Because I was saying I want to do a book about it. And they're like, well, instead of doing a book, do a special issue. Mark Skirman actually said that. And I was like, yes, okay, I will. And so I did. And I really put everything I had into that. I finished the exploration of it. I went out to places I had wanted to get to, but I hadn't been yet. And then I sat down and I forced myself to write it, because it's not easy. Writing is like really hard, as everyone knows. It's like one of the hardest things to do. And then it came out, and it was just a good reception, and sort of started me off. Luckily, my first book didn't really start me off. Nightshade on the Passaic, my special issue for Weird New Jersey, was what kind of started me off. And then I found that voice that I had been looking for, and it turned out to be a nonfiction voice. So I started going out and just writing about my adventures that I was just going on anyway. I've been doing this for a long time, and it never really occurred to me to write about it until Nightshade on the Passaic, and then it all clicked. It's been ever since then I've had the right path, and that path is the Passaic River. That's what I follow.
It seems to be your place. Yeah. And you do this always alone, or do you ever have anybody with you?
On the river, actually, I have like a little crew, people I trust. My wife, my friend Frank, who is an excellent mechanic. He helped me out mechanically, because I had a lot of mechanical trouble keeping a boat on the river. The river's harsh. It's a very harsh environment. So I needed a really good mechanic. And luckily, my friend Frank is excellent. And he actually was more than just a mechanical guide. He had been, he had been boating on the river for years. And so he took me out in his boat and showed me some stuff. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And he helped me find a boat. He helped me fix the boat. He helped me do everything. So
That's
my
awesome.
buddy Frank, my buddy Mike, my wife, Mr. Rapp, who used to own the boatyard, that's where I kept my boat. He was a really good guide for me for 2 years. And then, so 2012, 2013, I kept my boat on the Passaic River in Kearney at Rapp's Boatyard. And then after that, Mr. Rapp unfortunately died. And then the boatyard is still there now, but it's just really in bad shape. I mean, really bad shape. Basically an abandoned building at this point. And that happens to be right next to this rail bridge that's a part of the old Booten line, which is part of my next. So it all fits. It all comes together like gears in a cog.
So infrequented, people don't come out here much, man. And it's pretty cool to see it firsthand. A lot of really beautiful sights, a lot of really tragic sights too. And I've been out here for hours and I haven't seen a single person, except for all the people driving and the people flying over my head and these little flying airplanes. And I mean, I'm surrounded by people, I'm surrounded by civilization. But this is a little island where I can't reach them, they can't reach me.
Sometimes, local lore and legend make their way into Wheeler's travels. One such legend is Annie's Road.
Like most urban legends, there are many variations to the myth. The earliest fables I've heard about Annie date back to the 1700s and take place during colonial times. These tales usually describe Annie as a young bride-to-be, walking with her family down Riverview Drive toward a shady glen by the river, where her groom is eagerly waiting. It's the happiest day of Annie's life, but just as her fiancé comes within sight, a runaway horse carriage whips around a bend, slams into Annie from behind, and drags her beneath the rear axle for several hundred yards, until her body is flung clear and her corpse lands with a thud at the feet of her horrified fiancé.
I think I actually had a couple little, I don't really believe in ghosts, but I did see a couple like strange things on my, at the sanatorium. There was this one place where they had all these leaves, and it was like a big parking lot where people used to park, and the town brought their leaves in after the place was abandoned. They had lines and lines and lines of compost, basically. And me and my friends, we were there on our bikes, and I think we had put our bikes down, and we were just like in the compost piles walking. And I look over at the hospital, which is all overgrown and scary looking. I see a woman standing there all in white. And I just was like, and I looked away for 1 second. I looked back and she was gone. It was like the slightest impression of a woman standing there in white. But then many years later, I found out that these balconies where I saw her standing, they used to take the tuberculosis patients and open the doors, and they would wheel them out onto these balconies, and that they would be in their white bathrobes like this, like in their white like gowns, and that they would try to get this fresh air for their tuberculosis lungs.
The treatment that they.
So it really freaked me out, because I was like, oh my God, like I actually saw a woman in that same type of garb standing there just for I can't even see if it was real or not. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then another thing, at the sanatorium, I used to keep a BB gun up there. I used to have like this machine gun. It looked like an M16, and I'd walk around the halls with this M16 all the time, feeling like, like I was the man. I was like a little kid. I was 13 years old, you know what I mean? But like, I felt like a big man with this big gun. And anyway, me and my friend Scott, we were up there walking through the hallway one day, and ahead of us, we heard somebody walking, and we were like, hey, and we chased them, and then they took off running, and we heard the steps like running down the hall, and it was like a little bit of a curved hallway. So anyway, we chased them, and we hear the footsteps go to the right in the hall, in another hallway. So we go down that hallway, we hear a door slam, we go through the door, we kick open the door with a machine gun, I'm just like pointing it, waiting to corner somebody, and it's a bathroom with no other exits. We kick open every single stall. There's nobody in there. There was like a 4-story drop or a 3-story drop out the window. Like there was just no way anyone could have gotten out of that room, and there was nobody in there. So it was like we were following these like ghostly footsteps. So I can't really explain a couple things that I've seen. Other than that, I tend to not believe in these stories, I think if I did believe in these stories, I wouldn't really be able to go Because when I go like into these abandoned buildings and everything, I don't feel any fear, I used to when I was little, but
there's nothing there. So
it's all gone for me. Even like fear of like homeless people and stuff like that. Like I've just been dealing with people on the streets for so long, it just doesn't scare me anymore. Consequently, I never had any problems. So
yeah, I was gonna say, like, what kind of people would you run? Like, if you do run into people when you are exploring these places, what kind of people would you run into?
People less scary than me, I'm the scary person there now. When I was little, I was really scared. Now I grew up to be the thing I was scared of. So yeah.
What are you
and really,
of?
I'm not that scary either. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like your perspective when you're a kid. Then what you're exploring is new to you, and you're a kid. Then as an adult, you see things a little differently. Even exploring, I feel like maybe you see differently.
Yeah, because these places, they straight up look haunted. They are scary just on that level alone. But as an adult now, I'm not really scared of that. It's all good.
What is it about abandoned buildings that attracts you? And also your writing is interesting because it seems like it's like a public journal.
Yeah, it's like one of those acquired tastes, you know what I mean? Where like you go in there and it just gets under your skin and you love it after a while. Like it really scares you at first, and then you grow to really love it. And that's what abandoned buildings were for me. And yeah, as far as the writing goes, it is sort of just like, okay, I went here, I did this. I went here, I saw this. And it's just a matter of like going to interesting enough places where you can just write like that, and it takes care of itself. You know what I mean? Like if you go to like the sickest abandoned buildings in New Jersey, believe me, you'll have something to write about at the end of it. You know, it's a little bit of an adventure. And the train tracks are the same way, like walking through the Bergen Arches, which is like these incredible train tunnels in Jersey City. It's like the Jersey City Underground. And I came out and then I found this in Jersey City, this really old cemetery that was the cemetery that the Sopranos shot all their sequences in whenever they had a graveyard sequence. And I explored like all these underground crypts in there and stuff. It's just endless fun in New Jersey, you know, if you're into that sort of thing. So I don't know. And then to write about it, it's just, that's the best part, because I like to do all my exploration in the wintertime. And then in the summer, I'll just be sitting around writing. Because in the winter, you can see everything. There's no leaves on the trees. Yeah, the infrastructure becomes known to you in the winter time. In the summer, it's just a big splotch of green, you know? So it's good to go to known places. Like I would definitely go like, you know, hang out in places I know already. But as far as going to new places, I like to do that in the winter because it's, you know, especially with the drone now, you can really see through the trees and stuff. So it's pretty cool. The drone brings a whole new perspective to all this. It's amazing.
I was gonna say, like places that are maybe like hard to actually like physically get to, the drone probably could, like, you know what I mean? Like in terms of walking, like overhead, you can see more and get further.
Oh, definitely. Especially like in places like the Meadowlands where you don't have a lot of access. The only problem is birds. You don't want to like mess with the bird. Like I don't want to hurt a bird. You know what I mean? And those little blades are sharp. That's what happened to me in Jersey City. When I finally reached Jersey City on my walk from Montclair to Jersey City, I wanted to fly my drone at the pier so I could get like a good shot of the waterfront where Pavonia Terminal used to be, which is now what's present day Newport. But I put my drone up, and like within a minute it was swarmed by seagulls, and I had to just like do this like really fast evasive action, just like bring it right down again and land on the pier. Luckily I didn't hurt any birds and I didn't lose my drone, but I was like, I got to get a better view. And that's where the helicopter ride came in. I ended up going for this awesome helicopter ride over North Jersey and Manhattan. And that's basically like the finale of my next book. So, and my next movie as well. It should be pretty cool. To see Manhattan from the air like that is like, whoa, it was awesome. Kind of touristy, but that's okay. You know, I don't mind.
How many books do you have in total that have been published?
Man, I'm not sure. 5 or 6 or something like that. I got a few in the works as well. I have 3 in the works, actually. I have this book about the railroad tracks, the old Boonton line. I have a book coming out after that, which is a novel, and that's called The Cemetery Clown. And it's about the funeral business in North Jersey. And a few other subject matters too, graffiti. Basically, though, it's about the mortuary business in North Jersey. And then after that, I have Wheeler on the Passaic. So I got 3 books lined up right now.
The funeral business sounds interesting.
Yeah, I never really thought. Yeah, I never even really
I used to work for a funeral home back in the day. Like that was one of my jobs. I was really interested in death, as probably everybody is. And I was curious about it and I wanted to learn about it. And so I figured what better way to learn about it than go work at a funeral home. So, and I had a friend whose father owned a funeral home. And so it just kind of worked out where I saw him one night and I was like, hey, what do I got to do to get a job here? And he was like, call my secretary. And so I was like 18 at the time. So I called the secretary the next day and she's like, all right, you got a suit? And I was like, no, but I could get one. So I got a black suit at the thrift store. It cost like, I think my suit cost like $3 maybe.
Wow.
And
I guess.
Yeah, it fit perfectly. And I went, and like the next day I had to take my earrings out and stuff. I worked in a funeral home from then on. And so anyway, I learned a lot about death, a lot about the funeral business, stuff like that. It was very interesting. It wasn't going to be a career for me. Originally, my parents were like, oh, maybe you could be a mortician. You know, it just... It wasn't so much dead bodies. It was dealing with the families and the grief and stuff like that. That was really the hardest part. Like dead bodies, they're just dead. They don't matter anymore so much, but the families that are left behind and they're in pain and you just feel for them so much. It's like, it's horrible. Like I couldn't deal with that. So, and also I got fired, so, but it always stuck with me. And then when my parents died in 2020, they died within 2 weeks of each other.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah, it was a pretty rough time. And I started dealing with the same funeral people that I'd worked with 20 years earlier. He was really great with us and everything. It was all good, but it stirred up all this stuff in me. And I don't know, I had this energy in me after they died. I just sat down, and my mom, she had like all these notebooks when I was cleaning out her house that were sitting in like one of the drawers, and they were just empty notebooks. So I just started writing. And what I wrote was this story about a clown, a guy who's sort of an unwilling clown. He doesn't want to be a clown, but he unfortunately looks like a clown, and he gets picked on all his life. And his family happens to be in the funeral business, and he becomes a mortician. And it's like basically this guy's life. And so it's called The Cemetery Clown. And that's the novel I'm working on after I finish with this train book. So hopefully it'll be like 1, 2, 3 with books coming out. And then after that Wheel Around the Passaic book comes out, I'm going to sit back and say, hopefully I'm done. Like I want to just retire.
Intern can do it. Yep.
Yeah. Right. It's just writing. It's just so hard. It's so hard.
It's very time consuming.
What I really love is reading. Like reading is easy. I read every day. I love books, and I think putting in the work to do the writing, that hard work to do the writing, to be on the shelf with all these authors that I've loved so much, that's what keeps me going with the writing. Yeah. And what you were saying before about how these people explore, but they don't really write. I think that's why, because they're really into exploring, but I just happen to be really into reading. So it's really, I consider myself more of a reader than a writer. I'm just trying to put my 2 cents into that like vast library that we have, the collective library. And most of my books will probably be about what they call urban exploration, but I look at it like slightly skewed,
What?
But I just, for any writer, they say write about what you love. So this is what I love.
And you still are, right?
Kind of. Luckily, yeah. Luckily, I've been able to continue on with that for quite a long time, while a lot of others have fallen. Unfortunately, I watched a lot of my friends like die and shit. So it's just like, a lot of people have fallen off, with drugs and whatever. Yeah, I've been lucky. I've been really lucky. Lucky to be alive.
And with the reading, which is obviously a solitary activity, right? And also you going into these abandoned buildings, or even the exploring you do for them, sometimes you do it solitary. So is that a big part of what helps you continue to do it, is that you have your own space?
I have plenty of like privacy and room to do what I want to do now. But yeah, when I was young, I didn't necessarily have that so much, I'd either be stuck at my parents' house when I was little, or then, like I had roommates or whatever. So I was always like going out into the world, to have my own space. And I would seek out these places where I could be alone, for different reasons. A lot of times because it was like I said, smoking weed, you got to find a place where you're not going to get caught. So that had a lot to do with it, especially when I was very young. But then, I don't know, I just got to like it, you know what I mean? And as far as going solo into buildings, especially like up at Overbrook, for instance, if you go there with more than one person, inevitably you're going to start having a conversation because people talk. And then if you start talking, inevitably your voices are going to ring through the hallways, and inevitably the cop that's sitting outside is going to hear some talking or some shuffling or some smashing, whatever. And then they're going to come in and arrest us all. If I fly solo, I'm a ghost. No one sees me. No one hears me. They may smell my patchouli, but it's like a fleeting essence that's lingers after I'm long gone. So I try to keep
my next question. Yeah, that was my next question was going to be like, in terms of like not getting caught, because we're, the places you go, I don't know if they're like solely like private property, or some things are public and you can kind of go around.
Well,
I would think like most abandoned places are.
When we used to go up there when we were little, there was this van. Like I said, it was sort of like an island of just trees and stuff. And you couldn't drive up there because both entrances to the hospital at the base of the mountain were blocked off. But there was this police van that would go. So all you had to do was just, avoid the police van. It was easy. And once you got in the building, forget it. They're never going to catch you. There's tunnels. There's all ways to evade them. So we never got caught up there. Even though it was like a $500 fine or something, that's what the sign said. Groups of kids would get caught there all the time. But, me and my friends, we knew it too well. Then when they knocked that down and I moved down to Overbrook, none of my friends, we had grown up by that time. So like my friends weren't really into this anymore. And I didn't hang out with them, in the same way. So it was all solo completely. And then it became out of necessity just to not get caught because the cops were like literally right outside. They were patrolling like constantly. And I went up there for however long it was and never got caught. So I think it was 2007 when they finally abandoned it completely. And then they tore it down, probably finished in like maybe 2018 or so. It took a long time for them to tear that down. So I was up there, the whole time and never had a problem. Towards the end, when they were knocking it down, I was like staying on the other side of the fence and just filming the destruction. I was like really into the demolition of the actual hospital and watching it come down and getting it on like HD video. And so they saw me do that the whole time. But because I wasn't trespassing at that point, I was on the right side of the fence. I didn't have to hide. And the cops would sometimes stop and be like, "Hey, man, are you getting some good footage?" I'd be like, "Yeah, dude." The same thing with like the train tracks. You're not supposed to go there, but the cops don't really care. I mean, they have better things to do a lot of times than bother with like these small infractions and whatever, especially on the train tracks. I don't know how they expect people to not walk on these abandoned tracks because there's no danger to it. There's no trains anymore. And it's like a convenient shortcut. Like, am I going to walk all the way up the block and then go over and then come all the way back down? Or am I just going to walk right across on these train tracks that aren't even being used? So to have these no trespassing signs up in Newark and in Belleville and all this, it's like almost an affront to the residents who live there. It's like they can't even utilize this open space in their own town. You know what I mean? Like, so whatever.
Yeah, it's like here in like Metuchen, Edison area. We have like the Middlesex Greenway, and that was a railroad track. And I remember as a kid, because it wasn't paved, that was like, you kind of go walk it and you hang out around there. That was like our little, because it's not a lot around here, but that was like our exploring. And, then they turned it into like a park essentially, and now it's paved, and now everybody's on it and running and cycling and walking. And it's like a weird and different experience to see it used by like everybody instead of like just the kids with their bikes, like, and nobody knows you're down there kind of thing. So
that's actually my complaint about this old Booten Line Greenway that they want to make too. It's ridiculous when you pave old railroad tracks to call them a greenway, because when you abandon them, they instantly become a greenway. They grow up, the deer move in, the wild turkey, the coyote. I've seen coyote in Newark on this railroad line.
Really?
So yeah, and they're going to go pave this thing. And how are these deer going to get from Newark to wherever? Like, this is where they live now. This is their only spot in these locations. And they're going to go in there and pave it from side to side. And they're going to call it a greenway. It's a roadway, not a greenway, So on one hand, I would rather see a bike path from Montclair to Jersey City than a row of condominiums that stretches from Montclair to Jersey City. Okay, yeah. But the greenway is really a lesser of two evils because it's deceptive. They call it that, but it's not real. It's just another road. So I don't know.
That's true. I just noticed now, like you said, condominiums and things and townhouses and all these things are going up, and it's like, but you're taking away all the green space, and now there isn't enough green space. So like when things are abandoned and they get like overrun with, weeds and grass and plants that grow, like that gives wildlife it's kind of like taking back space for wildlife, but then you kind of take it away when you start to build more like man-made things just for people to occupy, and it's less space for animals.
Yeah, that's what happened with Overbrook, man. And it was so sad because, like I said, I was watching them demolish the place. I was also keeping my eye on the deer that lived there, and they literally got pushed into the streets. They got pushed into people's backyards. And now because the buildings they used to protect because they were a no trespassing zone, there was 300 acres that were completely protected. Humans couldn't even weren't even allowed to go in there. So the animals just flourished, they really had a safe place. And it was great. And even the people that went in there, like me, we were treading so lightly that we probably didn't even disturb the deer and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But then once they ripped it down, oh my God, I saw some deers in distress that were stuck behind fences. They couldn't get past, stuff really disturbing to look at. And, there's just no planning for the deer. No one cares. Human beings, we don't care about stuff like that. And any little bit of space in North Jersey that's available, we're just going to gobble it up and develop. That's just how it goes. So I guess, there's really, now that I'm a little older and I have a little bit more experience and maybe some maturity, it's just I can accept these things, but at the same time, I don't like them. I still feel the same way as when I was a kid. I remember seeing the tuberculosis hospital, the rubble, and it just ruined me, man. It was oh, how could they do this? I felt like they really messed up, man. They really made a bad mistake. And, it's hard to look at things like Ukraine and see the buildings there and call losing my abandoned building a tragedy when you're seeing these horrible, real tragedies in Ukraine. But, on a lesser level, maybe not even on a lesser level though, because the deer, it's dude, we got to do something. We need a place for these deer where they can just be deer. We need a place for the animals around here where they can just be what they are. And these abandoned buildings are the last little refuges for them. And they also happen to be my last little refuge too. So it's I feel entwined with their fate a little bit,
Wheeler, one question is, so the work that you've done is Passaic County, Essex County, and that seems to be because of you growing up there. Have you thought or entertained the idea of expanding to different parts of New Jersey?
Well, the Pine Barrens always appealed to me down there, down the shore. And my grandfather, when I was little, he lived in one of those old people places in Lakehurst. And I used to go down there into the Pine Barrens, and I used to stay overnight with him, and he would tell me the story of the Jersey Devil. And I would get really, really scared because there was a pine tree right outside the window in the room where I used to stay in his house. And, we were in the Pine Barrens, and he taught me how to fish down there, and all the creeks were that brown water that they have in the Pine Barrens and stuff. So yeah, I love it down there. It's awesome. It's really awesome in the sandy Pine Barrens. I'd love to do a little bit more down there in South Jersey. As far as expanding, I'm pretty loyal to the Passaic River. It just interests me so much. I wouldn't really go further. Coolest thing I got to do was be in a book, which was awesome. It's called Islands of Abandonment, and it was by this really amazing Scottish writer named Cal Flynn. And she actually flew all the way to America to check out the abandoned cult mill in Paterson. So I met up with her, and I took her all through this mill, and she was writing about stuff that I've been talking about for a long time. I said how the sanatorium was an island of abandonment. And I guess maybe she had heard me say that over the years, in some of my stuff. And that's how she found me, because that's the title of her book. And so anyway, this book was really big, really respected book, not just in the UK, but in America too. And it's just it's published by Viking in America. And I got to be a chapter in this book. It was probably the highlight for me of just everything, just to be a part of this. And it's not about me, but man, to be in it is just, so awesome. So I'd recommend that book to anybody. Islands of Abandonment by Cal Flynn. Excellent, excellent book. Won a lot of awards and stuff.
Yeah. Is that the place with the multiple buildings in Paterson, or is that?
Yeah, it's the old Colt gun mill. It's where the Colt revolver, or every revolver, was invented. And they also did a lot of silk work there. So it was a silk mill afterwards.
Okay.
It's basically a little cluster of mills.
Yeah, that's the one then. Yeah.
Yeah, at the base of the falls, all overgrown though, filled with some of the best graffiti in North Jersey, and a lot of people doing drugs there, a lot of people camping out, living there and stuff. So kind of dangerous, extremely dangerous actually.
Yeah, maybe people don't go there if
yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, unless you're have some sort of death wish or something, or if you have a reason to be there, like I have a reason to be there. I can walk through there. A graffiti person could walk through there. Like a drug person could walk through there. But like your average guy with like his family along in tow should not go there,
Family trip.
Yeah, don't take a family trip to the Cult Mill in Patterson. But do go see the falls. It's right next to the falls.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The falls are fine. But if you like stray just a little bit from the falls, you're going to find some really cool shit. But it's dangerous,
Yeah.
Whatever.
Chandi, have you been to the
That's
falls?
one of my spots. I love that spot.
No, I haven't been to the falls.
You gotta go.
But I mean, for work a few years ago, I would have to drive to Patterson once or twice a week. And I wanted to kind of go exploring in that area, like Wayne and Patterson. And
Patterson is so beautiful. I love it.
It's really interesting, right? Zoe and I were talking about it, just how the industrial history of it.
Yeah. It's one of
Patterson, Newark, like all the Jersey City, like it's like actually like learning the history and going through and seeing like what was and what is now is really interesting.
Jersey City is awesome. I love Jersey City, man. Oh, I used to live in Hoboken for a little bit, and I used to drive into Jersey City, and I always used to wonder, like, what is underneath this roadway? Like, on the way into the Holland Tunnel, and then that's where this rail line that I followed from Montclair came out, and I was like, whoa, I always wanted to see this, and there I am. So again, the geography is like always like, I just follow the land.
Is that the one that's connected to that larger train station that's no longer used in Jersey City?
Oh, you mean the one in Liberty State Park?
Yeah, or no?
Yeah, that's I think the Lackawanna. There's like four different train lines in there. So you got like, it used to just be a whole rail, like the whole waterfront there was all rails. And that's why at the end of my book, I'm not even following rails anymore. I'm following the streets, 11th and 10th in Jersey City, going towards the waterfront, toward like, there's like the Newport Mall. And then there's like this whole like Hudson River walkway that used to all be train tracks. Whole thing. And it was cool because like they had like these really old cars back in the day. They were all painted black. Everything was painted black because they would burn coal and it would get all like the cars all dirty and stuff. So they just painted everything black to avoid being dirty looking. And you see these old pictures and it's just like, so beautiful. It's so industrial and harsh and awesome. And now it's just like a mall, big Chase Bank building and just like, all this development. So, I mean, I don't think, that stuff's inevitable. It's just, that's what it's going to be. They're not just going to leave these train tracks here. Obviously it's like prime real estate, but I like going back and finding like those old pathways. And
yeah, I think in Jersey City, I mean, that might be one of our next, is it St. Joseph's Church? Because of the urban legend with the, similar to what you saw, Wheeler, in the sanatorium of like a woman dressed in white. But I don't know if you've heard about that urban legend, but
no, I never did. I would recommend, if you're looking for something like that, the Harsimus Cemetery. That place is awesome. And that's where the Sopranos filmed all their stuff. And like you can actually find these crypts that you can like go into and stuff. It's like really old stuff. So yeah, that in Jersey City, that to me was the spookiest highlight. And it's surrounded by all these old train lines, and that's how I stumbled across it, just by walking in on the old lines. And the graffiti there is amazing. Only thing you have to worry about is people living out there in these spots. There's in Jersey City, especially in the summertime. Like I go there in the winter, there's a few hardcore homeless people out there, even in like 0-degree weather. But like if you go out now in the summertime when it's all overgrown, you're gonna find like communities of people out there doing fentanyl and living hard lives. And just be careful. The outskirts of any city like that is going to be like really dangerous right now, especially after COVID. I mean, it was dangerous before this pandemic started. Now you go to Patterson, it's like, whoa, really? They got some serious problems with drugs going on right now. It's a harsh world. You got to be careful everywhere you go, but Jersey can get real dangerous real quick.
Chandi's rethinking that. The Jersey.
Yeah.
I'm a
huge fan of The Sopranos, so anything related to that is I would do. It's actually when I was a volunteer at a nursing home, one of the guys, the old people, he he lived a couple doors down from the house that was filmed, but that's North Caldwell, right? So that's different. That's not.
Yeah, well, that's like the other end. You know, they filmed from North Caldwell to Jersey City to New York. I mean, all that, this whole area in North Jersey, like even my town, Montclair, there's like all sorts of places in Montclair. The tattoo shop where I got tattoos, they made that into, that's where Tony was. They had like an orange juice stand. He went to go get his orange juice and they tried to carjack him. That was actually a jinx-proof tattoo in Montclair. So it's just everywhere. I mean, you can name places like that everywhere. But yeah, specifically though, this one place in Jersey City, the Harsema Cemetery, where they filmed all their cemetery scenes, that is like the coolest place out of all the Soprano places. I mean, you got to check this cemetery.
I love cemeteries.
And it's really cool too. They actually have like concerts there and stuff. Like, yeah, because it's not abandoned, but they don't really have the money to maintain it. So they have like all these volunteer groups come in and like clean up and do all this weed whacking, and they'll have like these benefit concerts to like pay for little cleanups and stuff. But if you look, there's so much history in this one spot. You just got to check it out. It's amazing.
I'm definitely down for checking that out.
Yeah. I mean, this is what I do. It's really, it's not that big of a deal. A lot of people do it, but
a lot of people
fascinating.
Don't write about it though, right?
Yeah.
That might be the difference. Yeah. That might be the difference.
And it's
also like their motivation for doing it. And there's like, I don't know. I mean, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think most of the people who do what I do are really looking for some sort of like Instagram fame or something like that, you know.
You see like TikTok videos and you're just like, okay.
So there's that element to it, but at the same time, just hanging out in abandoned buildings and stuff is like really cool. So you can't blame people for doing it. I mean, whatever their motivation is, like you can see why it's attractive to people. Yeah. So,
and you going from a lot of fiction writing, and then is The Cemetery Clown your first fiction?
No, I actually have a novel out called Matt and Jess Forever.
Okay.
That's fiction. That's available on Amazon.
Okay.
That was my first novel.
Okay.
So this will be like my second nonfiction. My second fiction novel.
Sure.
But I would say that my book, Wheeler on the Passaic, is also a novel too. It just happens to be nonfiction. It's a lot easier to write fiction because you can just make up anything you want. You know, nonfiction is like, oh man, I try to be pretty stringent on my ethics as far as like, you know, I'm not a reporter. I could lie if I wanted to, but I try not to ever like have any untruths in my nonfiction. I want it to be like exact. And so when I go do research and stuff on a place, like I want like my dates to be right. I want everything. If I'm going to talk about pollution, I'm going to study the EPA reports. You know what I mean? Like just for my own sake, I like to be that thorough. When I do my reading, I like to read a well-prepared document, not something that someone just threw together. I actually care about the finished product, so I try to make it as good as possible.
Are all your books available on Amazon or?
Yeah. You can go to abandonedbooks.org. That's the publisher website, and find them all from there, basically.
Coming out in the fall, right? And you said you're having a few come out then too. So
October 30th, it's going to be a premiere on YouTube of the video that's going to accompany the old Butenlein book. So there's going to be basically a dual thing. The video's free; anybody can watch it. The book, you have to go on Amazon and buy it. I like to, when I do a project now, I like to have a video and a book. That way, everyone can see the video, and if they see value in the video, then they can go buy the book. But either way, I get to share it, which I like. I think if you just put a book out these days, maybe a few people buy it, but like if you put out a video in a book, then they can see like, oh, here's something interesting. And I always try to keep my books have a little bit more than the video. So if you watch my Newark branch video, you can go a lot deeper if you buy the book. You know what I mean? Try to do it that way.
Thanks for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Wheeler.
All right. Thank you.
Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Bound by the Cloak. We'd like to thank Wheeler for joining us for this week's episode. Wheeler has written quite a few books, and you should really check them out. You can find out more about his books at luckycigarette.com and abandonedbooks.org. Some of his books include 13 from the Swamp, The Old Asylum and Other Stories, and Walking the Newark Branch. And don't forget, be on the lookout for Wheeler's latest book, Walking the Old Boonton Line, which will be available October 31st of this year. On October 30th, look out for the video premiere on YouTube accompanying Wheeler's latest book.
Follow us on social media. We're on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and even TikTok. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening to another episode of Bound by the Club. We'll see you next time.